feel like, like if nothing else, the point of that book was to make, and it's not that I'm the first person to make it, but it's to make a different or new case for why audio and sound and music should be considered as distinctly. But the reason to focus on audio is, I think, most importantly, to think about, like, audio is the only technology of representation that I can think of where we have replaced the word usage so completely. Like, if people say, "Oh, I'm listening to music on my headphones" or whatever, it's like none of us have any hesitation to say that, even though what we're saying is like we're listening to some, at best, it's like a representation of some music experience that happened elsewhere. But really, we're talking about, usually studio productions that are more like a studio art that has to do with a very, like, recent technology of representation that happened to have been so good from the beginning, that we took it as if it almost passed a kind of Turing test. So the idea of the book is really like, if, there's no disputing that audio works for most people. You know what I mean? It's not like a technology representation that doesn't work. Like the frame rate is too slow, and so we don't quite believe it's a moving image or something, or that. And I think the deal with audio is that because even the earliest forms, the time domain was pretty well. Like you can simulate a consistent time domain thing with even like a spring. If you think of wax cylinders or records, any kind of consistent rotation has allowed a continuous, like, temporal arc being created by that, which is pretty much unbroken. I mean, the audio illusion is completely fucked as soon as you start chopping up, messing with the time domain. If you're warping you start speeding it up and slowing it down rapidly, or kind of starting and stop it, you stop believing that it's like a particular person's voice. But if you listen to a wax cylinder recording of a person singing with a guitar, it's like there's no spectral information on that wax cylinder. There's nothing there. It's like your mind is filling in almost everything. But I think the time domain, given the temporality of something, we can fill in a lot of the other details. I don't think it works that well the other way around. But I think the purpose of differentiating between audio, sound, and music is to talk about, like, music, leaving music as this incredibly vulnerable human thing that humans do with each other, that involves other kinds of energies and other kinds of, my own experience of playing a lot of music and just being a part of, as an audience member of shitloads of music, there's just something fundamentally different. Even if you have some small person's recital, like a person with an instrument is a very, very different experience, even with your eyes closed, even when it's silent, than an empty stage with a sound system. That there's something essentially, there's a human energy component to it, which I don't think is useful to reduce. So I think, and the question with audio is, like, think of whatever music you've had the most powerful experience with as an audio representation. It's like, why does that work? Why do you have an emotional reaction to it? Why is there a spatial reaction to it? Why do we believe that it's testimony to, like, any human activity that's ever taken place on the planet? And so the book is really asking the question of, like, what is the enough? Like, what is the enoughness that travels through these audio systems that allows us to have that experience? And by asking that question, it's hopefully putting in relief what is really different about music. And sound, I think it's just like just recently there was news that was, physicists have discovered, like, the upper limit for the speed of sound or something. It's like sound is not about our ear. Sound is not even just 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Sound is like compression waves of all kinds. So when people talk about sound art or sound artists, it's like we should really be talking about people who are thinking about, like, the physics of sound. Mm-hmm. Most of what is sound art is really people interrogating audio technology, and in a million different ways. But I think it's one more example, and then I'll shut up about this. But it's like, I was giving this workshop on Zoom recently where I was using a AI representation of my voice. Mm-hmm. So I trained this, like, they're fine. Like, I've been watching it over the past 10 years, and it's like every year it gets a little better. And now there's finally one called Descript, which is pretty good. Like, if you train, you can pay $30 or something and train, you can start reading your voice into this the software, and then just start typing, and it'll basically render out stuff you have never said in your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been I think somewhere in the book I probably stated, it's like, as soon as you can do that well, as soon as I can record this conversation and scrape John Lamberton's voice and have you say whatever you want, then it's like, okay, audio is now clearly a representation. It's no longer proof in court, because it's not about like deep fakes or something. It's just like Photoshop. Everyone believes that images aren't necessarily real. And people should have always believed that audio is not real, that it's a representation of something that can be anything. It's about imagination. But anyways, the whole thing is actually not about critiquing that. It's really that audio is such a powerful tool for the imaginary that we need to look at what we use, how we use it for, and what the values are that are behind what we're using it for, and treat it as powerful a technology as it is. It's definitely, I'm all about audio. It's not a critique. It's actually some kind of like sideways, proposal for how to think of it, to give it even more power.